Well, hello, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in during the lunch hour when there's so many other things you can do, like grabbing donuts or watching Netflix during a sneak lunch break. My name is Maria Brown-Spence. I'm the program manager here at the Entrepreneurs Foundation and extremely excited for this conversation with Culturati Live. Also, shameless plug, who would I be if I did not plug my organization and a wonderful virtual summit that we have coming up called Culturati Summit, which is going to be a 3-day experience, April 4th, 5th, and 6th. There's going to be lots of discussions, breakout sessions, a wonderful opportunity for you and your team to talk about culture, or just anyone that wants to learn more about DEI, mental health, and wellness. And if you register by this Sunday, you'll get the early bird price of $175. Who can beat that? 3 days of summit for only $175. Yes, I said it was a shameless plug and I'm saying it again. Make sure you register by this Sunday to lock in that early bird promotion. All right, so everyone shake it out. Let's get comfortable. Gonna have a great candid conversation here with my wonderful panelists. So who do I have on my virtual stage? I always like to announce my panelists, but give them the opportunity to give their elevator spiel, excuse me. So I have Madison Butler, Kazique Prince, and Netta Jenkins. So Madison, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maddie. I live in Austin, Texas. However, I am not a Texan. Those words will never come out of my mouth. I am a New Englander through and through. So the weather to me last week wasn't actually a shock temperature-wise. The rest of it was all pretty shocking. I have a career that is centered around helping startups and early stage companies create psychological safety and organizations that really allow people to thrive. I think in DEI, we focus really heavily on metrics, and then a lot of the other stuff gets kind of lost by the wayside. In my spare time, I'm also the VP of people for a startup here in town.
All right, Dr. Prince.
Well, for some of us, it's still a good morning, and others, good afternoon. My name is Kazique Prince, and I'm super excited to be with you guys today. I've actually been following Netta and Madison online for quite some time, and really honored to be joining them today. And Maria, thank you for inviting me to be here today. I am the founder and executive director of Jelani Consulting, based here in Austin, Texas. I am a fifth-generation Texan. Hopefully, it doesn't sound too Texan over here. And I've been running my business for about 14 years. Our tagline is where we bend the curve for justice for good. And I'm also the interim executive director of the Central Texas Collective for Racial Equity, which is a continuation, I should say, of the Mayor's Task Force on Institutional Racism and Systemic Inequities here in this region. But those are just two of the hats I wear. Well, another hat I have is a dad of two grown adults who still try to boss me around, but I take their direction at will, and I appreciate their time and love and affection. And that's enough for me. Thanks.
Take the wheel, Netta.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. I'm originally from Rhode Island. Maddie and I both share that connection there. And I currently live in New Jersey, which is 15 minutes away from New York. I have 3 children. Oh, Lord, help me. I have an 8-year-old, I have a 9-month-old and a 21-month-old, so super busy. And my focus is on diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging within the workplace, as well as anti-racism, anti-Blackness, really heavily focused on that. I have my own consulting business called Holistic Inclusion Consulting. I also have a platform, a technology platform called Dipper. So Dipper guides professionals of color to a better workplace, one review at a time. We need a safe space. We're gonna talk about that soon. And I'm also VP of Global Inclusion for a technology firm in New York City. So thank you.
Thank you all. And I must clarify those dates. That is April 6th, 7th, and 8th for the Culturati Summit. So thank you all, Madison, Dr. Prince, and Netta. So let's go ahead and get started. When I do this, that means we're gonna get real. So in November 2020, NPR did a poll and they found out that respondents said being Black is exhausting. Now, as a Black woman, I know I didn't need a poll to figure that out. So tell me more about being Black in the workplace and how exhausting it could be, from microaggressions to hair discrimination to all the different things. Do you think exhaustion holds back Black employees in the workplace? Do you think you can't be your full selves? Tell me more about that. Madison, I'll go ahead and start with you.
So I think for me, the thing that is exhausting is the way society tries to force us into these boxes. Being Black itself is not exhausting. Being Black is amazing. However, the way society wants us to be Black is the exhausting part. I think we are so taught to believe that there's this one way to be Black. There's a right and a wrong. There's a black and a white. And we spend all of our time trying to lean so hard into proximity of whiteness that it becomes exhausting. It took me a really long time to figure out that I was being two people every day. I was being the person that I am, and then I was going to work and turning on my phone voice and sounding like this and making sure I smiled hard and laughed a lot. And that is exhausting for me. And between that and then having to explain why I deserve to survive a traffic stop, it becomes exhausting to have to continuously validate your own lived experiences, but also your right to survival. That's the exhausting part for me.
And go ahead and feel free to chime in at any time.
Yeah, awesome. Being Black is beautiful. And I think, again, Maddie hit it on the nail. I love being Black, but I think my exposure to specifically how white people, right, think about Black people hit me very hard when I was 7 years old. And I watched a white woman spit in my mother's face at the age of 7 and say, Blacks don't belong in my neighborhood. And that was the beginning of the exhaustion, right? But it was also the beginning of me understanding who I was and what I was going to fight for. And so that's how come I say Black is so beautiful, because Black, there's strength in Black. There's strength in Blackness. And there's this continuation of rising above, even the midst of pain, hurt, fear, right? It's still, there's still that level of overcoming. So that's what it is for me.
Everything that I think Madison and Netta mentioned, that I definitely would co-sign on. I would say, being Black has been my superpower from day one, right? It's been the thing that rejuvenates me. It's the thing that sustains me. It's the thing that gets me waking up. And oftentimes the rub is having to deal with a society of racism, white supremacy, that tells you to shut your mouth, be quiet, to be invisible, to have your thoughts, words, and mere presence, your mere body being a nuisance to them. And so when I can find those spaces where I don't where my superpower is honored and respected, is seen as a glowing light that it is amongst other glowing powers and spirits, that's when I feel rejuvenated and I feel free. When I feel exhausted is when I'm in the spaces where I'm asked to cover up and be in a cocoon of some sort and not to shine. And so that exhaustion is a day-to-day experience. And sometimes what you see is not the brilliance, but the rage and frustration and sadness that may come with it. But I can tell you on a day-to-day basis, I see it as a superpower, and I try to make sure I use it and access it every day.
Can we just say Black is beautiful one more time? Like, that is a statement we all need to take with us in everything that we do, but assimilation as well. That is so exhausting, like you guys have touched on. And I put a poll out here too, asking a question if you know what the Crown Act is, which in 2020, 2021, that should not even be a thing. But basically the Crown Act was a petition created by creating a respectful and open world for natural hair, that it was illegal to discriminate against someone at work or school over the way they wear their hair. So for instance, in California, there was a time if I went to work like this, I could literally be reprimanded or fired because of the way my hair grows naturally out of my head. And there were times I would not even wear my natural hair to an interview. I would always try to slick it back into a small bun to be as conspicuous as possible. And that became exhausting because doing hair is exhausting, period. And trying to make something work that doesn't want to work all the time can be even more difficult. So Madison, Miss Blue-Haired Unicorn, when did you first get comfortable with wearing your beautiful natural hair? And yes, turquoise can be a natural color right now. When did you get comfortable with wearing natural hair in the workplace and even playing around with coloring your hair?
So the absolute wild thing is I was so much more comfortable with colored hair before I was comfortable with my natural hair. So I've had colored hair in some form for probably like a decade now. And I've been everything from rose gold to hot pink to obviously the blue that I've had for the last 5 years. And I felt so comfortable with that over being comfortable with my own curl pattern. And, you know, growing up biracial, it leads to its own slew of like identity issues. And also like I had a white mom who had no idea what she was doing with my hair. So that played a part in it too. And then you get to college and you get so tired of people asking about your hair that you just straighten it. And so I straightened my hair. I had every relaxer. I tried a keratin treatment. I tried to keep my hair straight at all costs because I truly believed that was the only time that I looked pretty and that I looked adult. I always felt that with curly hair, I looked like a child. And so much of that is based on the fact that we lean so hard into Eurocentric beauty standards. We are taught to believe that like our curls are unmanageable and they're wild. And I actually went to an interview here in town, and it was actually when I came up with the blue haired thing. So people would stop asking me about my hair in interviews, and they were like, "Oh my God, we love you." And I was like, "Yay." And then they were like, "But," and I was like, "Oh no." And they were like, "We need you to cover your tattoos, wear a skirt, and we really want you to control your hair." And I was like, control it. Like, have you ever had curls? Like, it does what it wants to do. I can't control it. And for me, that was like the first time that I was like, well, I'm just going to do it. Like, I haven't straightened my hair since. I put no heat on my hair since, and it's been intentional. But it definitely wasn't till my late 20s that I felt comfortable showing up with all of this hair that I have.
Yeah. And I'd say for me, like I always loved, especially when I was younger, wearing braids, right? And so I remember just like feeling like people are petting me. Netta, can I touch your hair? Can I smell your hair? What are you using in your hair? Right. And then I remember one time when I was in much younger in elementary school, my braid fell out. And everyone, including the teacher, started to run, right? They're like, "Oh my gosh, there's a snake on the ground. What's happening?" And I had my extension, we call it protective hairstyle, right? But had they been educated on that, then they wouldn't have reacted that way. And I remember that incident really being hurtful for me, right? And then saying, okay, well, I need to do my hair a different way. I need to do the straight weave. I need to make sure I have the straight weave in that is sewed in, so that way my braids don't fall out and my extensions don't fall out. I want to make sure that I don't change my hair too much, because if I change my hair, then I'm going to be asked, well, how did your hair go from short to long? Well, why? Why does that matter to you? You know what I mean? Am I asking about your hair, the color of your hair, or the length of your hair, or asking to smell your hair, or why you're using dry shampoo and not regular shampoo? No. So I think education is so important. It's so powerful. And I always say that, especially for folks that have children too, or taking care of children, educate your children. Right? Because that's where it begins. A lot of these things, and even our parents, I remember my mom even in really embracing whiteness, right? And she was saying too, well, Netta, no, you should, you're going into work, make sure you have a very nice weave, or else you're not going to land the job, right? And it was interesting because I remember wearing my hair natural, and I have 4C tight curls, right? And so if it's a tight curl, it's it's shortened, and going into a job interview and not landing that opportunity, and everyone looking at me like I just got out of Roots, right, or the color purple or something like that. And so it's you know, I think it's really interesting, but we have to continuously educate ourselves on these, because a lot of the times, even as Black people, sometimes we're perpetuating these things, and we're normalizing them, because that's all that we see. That's all that we see in the media. That's what we see as acceptance.
I'll bring a slightly different perspective, but I think they're aligned with the things that Madison and Netta spoke about. As a Black male, I've had many different hairstyles. For those old enough to remember Jerry curls, that was a fun time, right? But I remember coming out of that phase in my life, really trying to what does it mean to be a Black man with a hairstyle, you know, and how am I going to be received by the world, by the different kind of hairstyles I decided to have. And so there was a time I actually, you may not believe it, but I had locks down to my shoulders. I had braids for a period of time. And that was all it was. And what I remember from that time was it was such an expression of who I felt like I was as a Black man at that time. And I had the same worries. My mom was like, baby, you gonna get a job with them braids? You look kind of militant. You look already kind of angry. And it reminded me of this as a Black man. I'm already having to walk on eggshells to make people feel comfortable because I'm this 6'2", 220 at the time, person. And so I'm having to be mindful of how I'm perceived as a danger to others because of my hairstyle. Even now, this expectation of facial hair, which we haven't mentioned, but I remember my grandfather shaving every day as a maitre d' and how his skin would respond with hair bumps. And so to this day, I still don't shave closely because I'm concerned about how it will affect my face. And it's actually quite painful for a lot of men who shave. And so these are the kinds of issues I think others don't ever have to think about or consider or wrestle with. But I think this conversation is important because I think it really speaks to the things that we have to navigate. And I'll speak not just as a person who experiences, but I think about this for my own daughter and my son, and the things that the guidance that they may want or try to navigate through themselves to figure out what's the next step and how do I become the person I want to be. And so it's an ongoing kind of journey of sorts around hair. As we know, hair is like our emotions. You don't want to play with them. So keep your hands out my damn head.
And I'll just add, I'll be honest, it took me a very long time for me to get comfortable with my hair. And I never really liked the way I looked with natural hair. And I think that's another thing, right? Because there's such a natural hair trend, it's like, hey, if you don't have natural hair, then you're not really being Black, right? And I don't think that's true either, right? We can wear our hair however we want to. But I just remember really feeling like, hey, I'm kind of pressured to wear my hair this natural style, but I don't love the way that I look right now. And a part of that, of course, we can say is because I wasn't doing it, right? And the normal thing for me was straight hair. But I think a part of it too is us being comfortable with saying whatever we want to do, right? Owning that and saying you're beautiful anyway that you want.
One thing
And
you touched on, oh, sorry, go ahead, Madison.
I was going to say, I really enjoyed what Netta had to say about her mom kind of leaning into whiteness. And I feel like a lot of parents still do that. My parents did that. And it wasn't ever intentional, but it was like, if your hair doesn't look like this, then you're never going to get into college and you're not going to get a job. And what are you going to do? How are you going to get a job with all of those tattoos? You know, and I think in general, it's just, that's how we've gotten to this point is society has painted this false narrative. And for me, so much of what I do, I want people to look at me and be like, oh, that's normal, rather than like, oh, you must not have a job. And I can't tell you how often on LinkedIn people are like, well, I would never hire you. And it's like, cool, I wasn't asking you to. But people automatically assume when you have natural hair or colored hair, or your hair is just different than their own, that you are living off the system, you're unemployed. And for me, that's like a really awkward conversation to navigate. But it happened within the last couple of years that someone who my mom knew asked her like, oh, when are you going to move out of that? When is Maddie going to move out? And my mom was like, she lives in Texas. And they were like, oh, well, I just assumed because of her hair. And I think a lot of our parents push this narrative on us unintentionally that we have to fit into that societal box. And then we take that societal box with us for the rest of our lives. And it is really hard to unpack and it is really hard to unlearn.
I'm really glad you guys mentioned this because that's the risk each of us take, right? By standing up and being true, and the assumptions that we have to navigate, oftentimes negative. And so when my mother asked me, "How are you going to get a job?" I said, "Well, I'm going to do my best." And thankfully, I ended up working for organizations that received my Blackness as I just demonstrated it. And I think that's the risk we all have to take. I also want to acknowledge for some of us, we may not feel like we can take that risk. And I get it. I understand it's a risk. It sometimes has negative, detrimental consequences for you and the people that you love. And so if you choose to make whatever accommodations or whatever you feel like you call it, then I say so be it. But I think what we're speaking about here is there is an opportunity to really challenge those assumptions and to stand true in who you are and find that organization or run a business the way you feel like you see fit without having to make those compromises all the time.
And I think it's also important to like say that the responsibility does not fall on Black folks to change the narrative. The responsibility lies within society, within these organizations. You have to create organizations where people feel like they can show up as whoever they are and be able to exist out loud, whether it be in their natural hair or in their queerness or in their Blackness. The responsibility of oppression is not on that of the oppressed. It's of those upholding the systems.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of people that, also want to know, well, can I just compliment someone on their hair? Absolutely. Heck, tell me my hair looks good, right? But just don't ask to smell or touch it. So I think it's totally fine to absolutely compliment folks on their hair, especially if it looks great, no matter what style they have.
Thank you, Netta. You talked about educational opportunities as well and learning opportunities, and that's what this panel is all about. Having a safe space to ask those uncomfortable questions that you may not feel comfortable in the workplace, but here like, okay, I'm behind a name, I can ask these questions, and I think that's so important as we talk about hair and being part of Black culture. I remember one time I was in a meeting and one of my colleagues literally went in my hair and touched it. And she said, "Oh my gosh, it's so soft and big today." And I just kind of sat there because again, I said, "Oh, excuse me," like very nicely, but I didn't want to be the angry Black woman for something that was just not acceptable. So how do you guys deal with microaggressions and things that are just not okay in the workplace that people feel like they can get away with? And I'm not just talking about hair, I'm just talking about everyday things that Black people experience in society.
I think a part of it, and you spoke to that, the angry Black woman, right? That's something that I would always think about before I kind of reacted. And now I'm really unapologetic about things, right? Because it's so important for us to create our own safe spaces. And also you have to advocate for yourself at times because these things will be perpetuated and it's only going to affect and hurt you. So there, an example of a microaggression may be you're left off of an email when you're working, you're the main person leading on the assignment, yet you're left off of that email. I have definitely very direct said, "Hey, what's happening here? Why am I left off of this email? I'm the one leading this project." And now because I really like to educate people, I will say, this is actually considered a microaggression. And I had to get comfortable with being okay with others being uncomfortable, because that was it. It was like, I'm so used to making sure that everyone else is okay and not rubbing anyone else the wrong way, that and it takes some time to kind of build up to that. But I got to the point where I was like, you know what? If there are things that happen, I have to let people know because they have to be educated on this. This way they don't do it again, right? And so I'm okay with letting people know.
Yeah, one that comes up in mind for me, Maria, is dealing with niceness. Um, this expectation that we be nice in all things that we do. And so when I heard Netta talk about being unapologetic, I'm not saying I need to go around and rage every day about some issue. While I justifiably could, It's not going to get my message across or what I'm trying to achieve. But this insistence on being just careful and be on eggshells about every little thing feels like one of the biggest microaggressions I deal with on the day-to-day basis, whether it be the dating scene, work scene, you name this expectation to be nice and all at all costs. And so one of the things I've said about Austin is that Austin is one of the nicest, most pleasant, respectful, racist places I've ever lived because it's this insistence on being racist in your face, and then you're supposed to sit there and be like, okay, and my reaction is supposed to be somehow muffled to respond with the same kind of niceness when actually I should be enraged by the onslaught of what I'm having to deal with. But the way I deal with it oftentimes is to speak to my frustration and voice it. But that's my style. That's my style, is to intellectualize it and express. Others is going to be another way. They're going to be like in your face, very upset. I just say we have to make room, as I think Madison mentioned earlier, for our expressions of how we experience these microaggressions, and take the risk of going out there and sharing those experiences. Because if we continue to play this nice game, our real experiences never get really flushed out or experienced because we're somehow, I don't know, protecting them from us, fulfilling the belief that somehow they can't handle the truth. The truth is they're saying some really messed up stuff and expecting us to be nice at the same time, and that shouldn't be allowed. And so dealing with it, it's nuanced, and I won't get into that, but I think each of us have different pathways of really sharing our experiences with others.
Agreed. And so I think for me, one of the largest traumas for Black people is the erasure of our emotions. We're expected to be these Black and brown stock photos on someone's career website or sitting in the office so quietly. And for me, it took me a really long time that showing up for myself and being authentic meant honoring my emotions and owning my emotions and also feeling my emotions and not pretending that I don't feel them for the comfort of someone else, because the only person I'm harming in that is me. I don't make them better by ignoring microaggressions or blatant racism. I hurt myself. And so I am one of those people, I like Netta and like Dr. Kazique, I turn it around very quickly. Like, so I used to have a hiring manager who asked every Black woman in every interview ever, oh my God, you're so articulate. Like, how did that happen? And I remember turning that around on him and being like, well, why did you have that thought? Like, why were you shocked that a Black woman spoke in a way that was articulate? Would you ask a white man that? And so for me, it's really about bringing that thought or that action back around to like, how does this make sense in your brain and how are you justifying it? And can you justify it with a white man or a white woman? And usually I get that like light bulb look from people, which is great. But then you have people who will always intentionally be harmful. And those are the people where I've said education will never be enough, because some people uphold white supremacy because it protects white mediocrity. And I can't help them. And that's okay. But in that moment, I can help myself by bringing it to the forefront.
Absolutely. Yeah. Gosh, I think health wise, right? A lot of people don't understand that. And I was reading a study the other day, microaggressions are linked to suicide. So there are a lot of hidden stories that aren't disclosed about especially Black people that end up killing themselves because of the mistreatment that's happening within the workplace. And so when you think about, and I think a lot of the times people take microaggressions very lightly, and there's nothing micro about it. It's macro, right? It's racism played out in a very slight way, so slick sometimes that you don't even know what's happening. It hits you at night when you're going to bed and all of a sudden you start crying. You're like, oh, what happened? And then you're trying to figure it out. Like, how do I address this person? You know, and I remember doing that for a very long time until it started eating away, right? Like stress, I had to go to the hospital, I had to go to the doctors, and you know, I had to save myself. I had to save my life. And I think it is so important when these things happen to sit down, relax. But if you're someone like me, don't be afraid to also address it, right? And I didn't address it in an aggressive way. I would just say, okay, well, I'm supposed to be on this email, or you know, you has to touch my hair and you were smelling my hair. I remember one colleague actually he was amazing. We got along. However, every time noon would come around, and it was lunchtime, he's like, yo, Netta, let's go get some lunch. And I'm like, well, you don't hear me talking that way, you know? And so I had to address it right there and then, because he was saying out in the open, and I wanted other people to understand, you're not, if that's something that you want to continue doing, that's absolutely fine, but you're not going to address me like that, because that's not how I'm talking to you, right? So it's, I don't know what you're watching when you go back home, but that's not what's happening here. And so I had to address him. And when I did, I think he got the point, and he came back and he apologized. He's like, you know what? I am so sorry that I spoke to you in that manner. So we have to make sure that we are respected.
I think it's also important to protect yourself in a way and understand that trauma is trauma, whether it is relationship trauma or family trauma or workplace trauma. It is still trauma, and your mind and your body are going to react the same way. And by erasing our emotions and pretending they're not there, we're essentially getting gaslit by society on a very daily basis. And you lose confidence in yourself and in your voice and in your convictions. And so for me, it's so important to acknowledge my emotions, because I, as a domestic abuse survivor, like, I refuse to get gaslit by anyone ever again, and specifically society, who has done it for reasons that uphold white supremacy and nothing more.
And I'm glad we were talking about this, because it really speaks to the importance of having the sources of support as we navigate through these really difficult circumstances that impact our well-being, our mental health, our spiritual vitality. That we have those friends, those family members, colleagues, and I want to put out there, because I know for a lot of people of color in general, we are not as inclined to go see a clinician or a therapist, and I want to stress the importance of having a therapist you feel like you can talk about these kinds of issues. Because sometimes you can go to a therapist and talk about your depression and stuff like that, but you may not have a therapist where you can talk about these issues of microaggressions and racism, because maybe the therapist isn't really trained or able to really deal with that. Go out and find that therapist who can have those active conversations on this topic, because if they understand those things, now it becomes another avenue for you to have these conversations of how you're going to navigate it, how you deal with the stress, how you're going to take care of yourself in all of this, which is critical, because we're over here, it may give you an impression like we're these superheroes who are just getting through life and nothing hurts us. But the truth is, we're managing things on a day-to-day basis. And so if you need to find a therapist who can support you in this work, or in the work that you do, in many ways, I would say go out and reach out for it and ask for that in specific ways.
This is just a plug. It's not for me though. Modern Health is a mental health company, and they do these things called circles. And they have 2 free circles right now, and one of them is about racial trauma. And so I also understand that healthcare is unfortunately a privilege, and not all of us can afford it. So I wanted to be able to plug a free option.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially what we saw last year with just all the racial injustices taking place and all the police shootings, that even adding more stress to what we already have to experience navigating being Black in America. And what we had one question here, and we're talking about educating and learning opportunities. How can we create a safe place in the workplace for everyone to share feedback and address microaggressions? What kind of advice would you give to someone that wants to make their employees feel more comfortable?
Accountability. For me, as someone who works in people, and I won't say HR because I actually think HR has like a pretty cringy connotation to it, so much is reliant on the policies we write, but are also the ability to enforce policy. If you write policy and then you don't enforce it, it protects your abuser, because they can now turn around and say, well, it's a policy. I obviously didn't do it. I didn't get in trouble for it. And so for me, the key to all of this is the ability to hold people accountable. And I don't care if they're your top performer. I don't care if they've been there 20 years. I don't care if Joe Bob is the CEO's cousin. Justice looks like accountability. And if you can't hold people accountable within your organization, it doesn't matter how many Black History Month events you have, or how many speakers you have, or how many pizza parties you have. Like, it doesn't matter if you allow abusers to stay and traumatize your population.
Absolutely. And what I'll say is, what I'm finding is this level of collective power, especially within the Black community. We used to be very afraid to share our workplace experiences because we wanted to keep our jobs, right? We still do, but we're in a different state, right? And I think Many of us are now sharing. We're sharing openly what our workplace experiences are, so that we're better informed, so that we're going to organizations that really are going to value us. A lot of people ask me, Netta, how is it that you work full time and you say whatever you get to say? You know, you challenge things on LinkedIn. I'm sure Maddie gets the same thing. And I said, well, because I went for an organization that was going to value my voice, right? That did not want to shut me down, that actually wants it amplified. And these are the things that we're challenging each other on every single day. Because they know, okay, well, Netta is normalizing this. We're not, whatever she does externally, she's doing the same thing internally, right? She is not code switching. And I think more organizations need individuals like that, but a lot of companies are very afraid to have these types of conversations. To Maddie's point, to put policies in place and processes and accountability in place is very, very critical.
And I like the question, but I feel it a bit unfair because to me personally, it implies a simple solution to a pretty nuanced, complicated thing we're talking about as far as creating a sense of belonging in an organization. Because what you're asking for is a shift in the culture, oftentimes a culture that has benefited from the way things are. And so why would I change things when I'm making money and I'm happy the way that things are today? And you're saying, as an outsider from their perspective, things are not going well for whatever group of people, and you want me to change things? And so part of that is by helping them buy into the idea that we actually are looking for an opportunity to improve our wealth and growth, or we're looking for happier staff. We have to make the case for why this shift in culture is actually benefiting not just them, but me as well. And so when you make that case in the nuanced ways that we're talking about today, building that accountability, creating this where people actually feel like they can take risks, because that's where innovation comes and creativity and sustainability of an organization. And so when you make that case and look at the nuances, I would say it's this shift in culture, but that requires now you have to make some hires and get some expertise to help you make this work, because you know what? I get it. You're scared because you don't know where you fit in all this change. And I don't see myself in this picture you've drawn for me. And part of the job of many of us is to help you see where you fit in this and how this really benefits you in the long run. And so it's a complicated issue that we're talking about, but I think that culture shift that we're talking about is critical to the kind of environment that we're trying to create.
I'll just add, what I'm loving too is I see that there are more people really practicing bold allyship, right? I've worked with a couple clients that are on the executive level that said, Netta, if my organization does not get it right, if they continue to mistreat Black and Brown people, I'm leaving, right? And these are people that are top performers that they want to keep and they feel they're adding to the bottom line. So I think that is really a beautiful thing, because then you see organizations quickly shifting, right? That also is how you dismantle that level of white supremacy. When you have white people that are speaking up and saying, hey, if this doesn't change, I'm out and I'm going somewhere that will value Black and Brown people.
And can I just say that when we think about belonging, the thing that's so important to me in making people feel like they belong is believing their lived experiences. How often do Black women have to bring 10 rolls of receipts to prove that they've gone through some trauma, which half the time isn't realistic, because when Joe Bob is a racist, I can't ask Joe Bob to run that back into my cell phone so I can get a recording. And so often we then get the response, well, I've never had that experience with Joe Bob. And it's like, well, yes, because you're a white man. Of course you haven't had that experience with Joe Bob. And rather than being defensive over people and thinking about, oh, are you just taking it the wrong way? Believe Black people when we talk about our lived experiences and our trauma. How can I feel like I belong if I'm constantly being told I'm a liar, or that I'm dramatic, or I'm over exaggerating? I can't feel like I belong unless I can talk openly and truthfully about what I experience in these four walls.
And I think since we are talking about the workplace, kind of the corporate space, let's talk about employer resource groups for underrepresented employees. That we'll use the Black experience here because that's what we're talking about. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's just one of those things to say, hey, we're being accountable, we want to be an ally for our Black employees. So here's a group. If you feel uncomfortable, you can talk about things. Or do you think that's just something to pacify that group to say, well, we did create something for you, but I guess you didn't take advantage of it. So what are your thoughts on employee resource groups and how can they actually be more effective for these things?
Yeah,
Yep. I'm sorry.
no, go for it. Go for it.
I would say it depends. Because in some organizations, they're pointless endeavors. They're a waste of time and energy and resources because the organization or whoever's involved with it has not really set them up to serve the needs of what I think many of us think of as a supportive and useful tool in organizations. And the organizations that do use them well, they do the very things you're talking about. They end up being an engine, maybe even artificial to some degree, bringing people together to have the conversations about the organization, about professional development, about leadership development. And so it is a tool. There are other ways of doing it. And so I'm not saying it's the only way of doing it. But I think there's some concern that's legitimate from a lot of folks because their experience of ERGs has not been positive because they're not functional. They don't accomplish anything, or the powers that be don't actually use them for any real purpose other than to say they have one, which isn't really good either. And so I would say it depends, as long as it's meeting the criteria that many of us, I imagine, are going to really touch on, is that they're actually being useful in some meaningful way.
Yeah, absolutely. And companies need to just stop free labor. Why is it that employee resource groups, and of course, they're the underrepresented groups, are not paid? They're adding a level of belonging, inclusion. They're doing a lot of meaningful work in some organizations across the board. And so to see that there are so many organizations that are not paying people for all of the work that all of the value that they're adding. A lot of people don't know that having ERGs, it actually helps to increase that representation, right? It helps to increase retention. And so a lot of times those measurements and stats are not given back to the ERG. So they don't even know the level of impact that they have within the organization, and they're just working for free. So my thing is pay folks, pay people. No free labor.
That was my sentiment exactly, is like people are expecting their ERG groups to do the work of a consultant or a consulting team, but they don't want to pay them less when I would 100% be sending you an invoice for doing that work. And on top of that, I think the other thing is they think it's like a Band-Aid. When Black folks are having issues at work where they don't feel like they have a sense of belonging, they're like, oh, we'll slap an ERG on it and call it a day. But the thing about this work is it only works when it comes from the top down. So if you have a group of people who are your lowest paid employees trying to make change, but no one at the top is interested in making change, nothing happens. And it becomes this like echo chamber of people who want to make change, but can't facilitate change because they're not given the power to make change. And you don't solve anything. It's a Band-Aid that doesn't actually work. You just hope that in that moment, it helps them be a little bit more complacent with their problems. And that's the issue I have with ERGs, is I think too often we use them as people want them to be like a club, and they don't want them to facilitate change. They want to give them like a room where they can go talk about how upset they are, but no one has any intention of changing the reasons why they're upset. And so I think there are tons of people that are doing it the right way, but I think there are more so that aren't.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm VP of Inclusion for a technology company. We are paying all of our ERG leaders on an hourly basis. The company has about 400 employees. They gave them $25,000 for each employee resource group. Like the company is actually putting their money where their mouth is. And we see much larger organizations, they don't give anything, right? Then there's structure, and the work that they're doing is also baked into their performance reviews, right? So like it has to be that this is also impacting people's careers. People can't just be used for how they're identifying.
And one thing I would add is that I think what I hear many of us today on the panel are describing is the experience many people of color and women experience outside of work, being again overburdened and made to be held responsible for the move of an organization in particular direction without any kind of compensation. So it's free labor, let's call it what it is, slavery, to create change in ways without the power or influence to actually create that change in the first place, and then being held accountable if it fails in some way or another. So when we talk about getting paid for our time and getting recognition for the work that we do and all the other ways that need, and actually taking what we say seriously and giving us data and a means of collecting that data, that's all because we know how this plays out. And what we're trying to do is not to predict what seems like the inevitable and actually create the kind of success that we're really trying to develop.
And just one more thing, one more quick thing to add for anyone thinking about, hey, how can I really drive impact in this ERG? Executives should be sponsors or champions of every single one of those groups. So the same thing, there's an executive that's leading each of the groups, and they're bringing people in, and they're having career coaching conversations, and they're adding input to the performance review as well. So that's critical because it can't just be the ERG. No, folks need to also be champions of it, and it should be executives that are doing that as well.
Well, you guys, can we continue this conversation for like 3 more days? Oh, we can actually during Culturati Summit, April 6th through 8th. But no, honestly, these are the conversations that we need to have public facing and not behind closed doors to make change or try to make change in organizations and within companies that actually want to have true change made. So we do have quite a bit of questions here that I want to try to get into, and some we did ask throughout the conversation, so I think we hit on that. And again, we have LinkedIn profiles being added to the chat, so you can stay involved and included and continue the conversation there. But I have one question here from Amy. Do you have advice on how to make the case to your company to commit resources to bring in training and make changes to make the workplace more safe and respectful for Black employees?
You know, this one is always a hard one for me, to be honest, because I'm almost at the stage with companies, if they don't see that this is something that they need to do, don't even fight. I almost want to say, look for another organization that is actually putting the work in. And maybe they're not all the way, maybe that organization is not where they need to be, but at least they're doing some of the work. I think if any organization needs a business, like a business guide into what to do right now after everything, that I don't know how sustainable they will be, to be honest. And I don't know if you'd even want to put that level of energy in there.
Agreed. And I think that was why I was kind of struggling to find an answer, because I'm at this point now where, like, when people ask me for a business case, I'm like, I don't really want to work with you. I shouldn't have to give you a financial ROI on why you should hire Black people and then why you should treat them in the same way that you treat white folks. And so I kind of agree, like, if you don't get it at this point, I don't know how we can help you further get it. There's only so many traumatic catalysts we can have before, like, I don't have anything else to say. And so there's so much education and information available. Google is free. And so I agree, like, if your company just doesn't get it, reach out to me. Let me find a company that does.
And I appreciate you, Madison and Netta, again. I think this is a hard thing because, to be honest, our time is money, and we don't want to waste a lot of time on folks who are going to fight us tooth and nail along the way. And so I think there's a legitimate hesitancy to work with folks who just don't. I mean, there's so much information out there now about the business case for this work. It's like, if you want to do this work, you don't need an excuse. Just do it. But I've had many of HR or people director who will come and say, I'm committed to this. I have many of my staff are committed to this, but my leadership is not. What are some ways that we can interject some conversations? And I guess the thing I want to highlight here, and I think each person has to kind of gauge for themselves how far to take this, because again, I don't want you to waste your time. But who are the co-conspirators within your organization? What conversations do you need to have internally about how far this can or may not be able to go? And if you discover in this conversation, there's actually more people committed to this than you thought of. Maybe there's more of energy towards this than maybe it feels. But I think what we're talking about is that initial internal informal assessment about how fertile is the ground for this conversation, and how much time do I want to waste towards this? Because if I do, I want to see a return on investment, let alone the company's return on investment. And so I say part of this is just getting a gauge of what's going on in your organization, so you know whether this is a worthwhile endeavor in the first place.
Yeah. And honestly, I'll say that's one of the reasons why I created ourdipper.com, really to guide professionals of color, Black and Brown people to better workplaces, one review at a time. So folks can actually see, hey, what type of work is really happening? I can't tell you how many times I thought an organization was going to be great, and then you waste your time and you incur like the stress level and the health conditions and all of that. And so I think the more that we know, the better that we can make the right decisions.
All right, so we have another question and we only have a few more moments left, unfortunately. Love this conversation so much. Is it overstepping to call out microaggressions on someone else's behalf when you witness them?
Absolutely not. No, go for it, because a lot of the times, I think with microaggressions, people are scared. People are scared to say it. So it's always helpful to, if it's someone else that recognizes that and can step in and say, hey, you know what, this was a microaggression here, and this is what you should do next time. Or maybe you should talk to that person and tell them how you recognize or you saw what you did, right? So I think that's such a great thing to do.
And I think one of the things that, at least how heard the question, we are oftentimes bystanders to all kinds of insidious behavior. And I think what we have found in the research is that by speaking up and calling out these microaggressions that we witness or we hear about through the experiences of other people, by being a co-conspirator, that means speaking up when these things happen. It doesn't mean that they can't speak for themselves, but it's I think appropriate at times to say, you know what, I watched them experience you in this way, and it bothered me. So you can speak your truth to power and speak about your experience of being a witness to their experience or their story, and being a champion for that in a really meaningful way.
And I also think there's a level of being a co-conspirator that means thinking about how you can take emotional labor off of people. And that's incredibly important because, again, like I said in the beginning of this, it's so exhausting to try and validate your own experience 365 days a year. So if someone wants to do it for me one day out of the year, I'm here for it.
Well, we only have a few minutes left, and so I really want to leave the floor to you all. Any advice, last words you want to give, or just encouragement to those that are on this call navigating anything difficult right now? We're already under so much stress. And to add on to that, navigating your own uniqueness in a space can be difficult. So now is the time for you all to leave the audience with any last words. They are booming and connecting with you guys on LinkedIn already. So I know you're going to get some messages after this as well.
Yeah. I think collective power is so important, right? Sharing what your workplace experiences are can really save someone else's life. So let's continue to share. Please feel free to share on ourdipper.com so that others are guided and informed on making the best career decisions possible.
I'll get in there real quick. What comes to mind is my experience growing up in the Black church, and one of the things we did in the Black church is, I need a witness. I need a witness to testify to my experience. And you don't have to be in the Black church to understand that. And what I think you heard today is how important it is, if you're going to be a co-conspirator in this work, to be able to stand up and be a witness to the travesty and injustice and all the really horrible things that are happening to women and people of color and other groups of people. And by you standing up in your strength to support other people and being a witness, not just a witness, a passive one, but one who actively creates change by using your voice and using your body to create change, man, that's what we need today. Be a witness and do something about it.
And so I guess mine is Blackness is not a monolith. And so wherever your identities intersect with your Blackness, you're still incredibly valid. And the world is full of trauma, and taking care of yourself and self-care doesn't need to look like massages and eye patches and facials. Sometimes self-care is crying into your pillow and writing 12 journal entries. And sometimes it's laughing as hard as you possibly can till your abs hurt. But whatever it is that you need to do to take care of yourself, we cannot begin to dismantle systems when we haven't cared for ourselves appropriately. And so I encourage people, like, it's okay to log off, it's okay to need a day, and it's okay to just be with yourself and take care of you.
Oh, I think we're all inspired here right now, but there are 3 things I want to leave these attendees with during this conversation. Use your voice, live your truth, and support others along the way. That's the only way we'll have true change take place and find organizations and companies that have a culture you want to be a part of. So thank you all for attending. Panelists, you guys are amazing. This information will be kept with us for so long. And if you want to continue more conversations like this, make sure to attend the Culturati Summit, April 6th, 7th, and 8th. We'll give you more information in a follow-up email, and we'll also share the link to our next panel discussion taking place March 15th with Raj Kumari Niogi. So make sure to stay connected with us on social media, follow the panelists, and we hope to connect with you next month. So take care, everyone, and give yourself grace during these times. Signing off. Take care, everyone.